What's up, everybody? Ian Walsh here, Hard Money Bankers. Have a special guest today on our show, John Featherman. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be here.
John's got a pretty long-standing history with the Philadelphia area in different ways, not just in real estate. He's been a broker for Berkshire Hathaway for quite some time, but he actually ran for mayor in 2011. Very close to winning, lost by about 64 votes. Was a TV correspondent with UPN
57.
57, TV correspondent at UPN 57. Currently teaches real estate at Temple University. So you have quite a vested background in the Philadelphia market in real estate, in both improving it, the space, and actually investing and being inside of it. And I know you and I had gone back and forth quite a few times. You're very adamant about your positions on where things are, and I think right now is a time when people need to be that way in the Philadelphia space, because we're looking as investors and real estate agents and so forth that the city of Philadelphia right now needs some help, I think is the best way to say it. So give me some background or some idea on what your thoughts are on the city of Philadelphia right now in the real estate space and the political space.
So for about 5 years, I wrote a column called U-Turn for Philly.com, which is part of the Philadelphia Inquirer. Today, the Philadelphia Inquirer's lead-in story on Philly.com is about concerns that builders have with Philadelphia. And the number one concern that they have, builders and investors, is the crime rate. That is the number one issue. So when we look at next year's mayoral race and city council race, in which we will have 17 seats up for grabs, we've got to ask, will the next group of legislators be pro-investment, pro-growth, or will they be anti-growth? And it's not very difficult to tell, because for those that were incumbents on city council, for those that are incumbents in state government, we know what their records are. We know what their voting records are. We know what their initiatives have been. The question's ultimately going to come around to whether Philadelphia is going to address crime head on by, for example, hiring more police, funding the police more, having a police chief who will give the police the ability and the green light to do their job, versus the other approach to crime, which is to try to get it through osmosis, if you will, through the ground up, by addressing it mostly as a poverty situation, and how you address the 1/3 of the people in Philadelphia that live at the poverty level or below. So we have very different approaches to how we're going to address crime, but the investors, the builders, the lenders all know that if the public image of Philly is still that it's a dangerous city, in which this year carjacking has gone up more than 300%, we are not going to succeed, and we are not going to attract investors unless we have a pro-growth, pro-business, pro-landlord environment.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been around Philadelphia long enough to know that once upon a time there was, Philly was, I feel like we've cycled back into this, not great reputation city, right? So maybe it's probably like 15 years ago or 20 years ago, maybe Philadelphia was the scary place to be, right? Scary place to bump into. Then all of a sudden, you had some reform and some change, and crime went down, and Philadelphia was this booming family-oriented area. And then post-COVID, you have all of a sudden we've gone right down the tubes again. And it's like it went up, and then it's just, something needs to happen, like you mentioned, whether it's the approach of fund the police or osmosis, whichever way you want to go with this. Something's going to need to change, or you're just going to, if not, you're just going to simply have continuing to rise crime rates, and you're going to have people moving out of the city, and you're going to have less growth. And that's really not how I think somebody would want to win the election. And the current mayor already, what did he say? He threw his hands up and said, "I don't want to do this anymore." Right?
That's what he said on July 4th.
Yeah.
There were 2 police officers that were hit from bullets that they believe were over a mile away, where the police were not even the intended target. And right around midnight, he came in and he said, I'm looking forward to the day when I'm no longer mayor. And the issue that bothered me was not that he said that, because many of us have believed that for a long time, that he's waved the white flag and has given up because he's MIA. He's missing in action.
Right.
What really bothered us was that people on city council who could have stepped up to the plate, the strongest response we got is, well, maybe he should resign. That's not the response we should be getting. We should have city council members, we should have anyone who's aspiring to be mayor stand in front of City Hall with a bullhorn saying, Mayor Kenny, you need to resign today. And they should have been out there with their supporters. The problem, I think, in Philadelphia is many of the politicians like to play it safe. We don't need someone who's going to play it safe. We need someone who's going to turn around the economy. Now, let me tell you, not all of it is due to just sort of crime happening. There is a structural change that came from COVID that has, in my opinion, forever changed the commercial real estate market in Philadelphia. And that is, from COVID, we learned that many companies were able to function by having people work from home. And it's kind of a win-win situation. Most companies have not gone back to requiring their employees to come back to work 100%. Most have developed some kind of hybrid. And for that reason, commercial real estate, in my opinion, is never quite going to be where it was before, because firms that may have needed 5,000 square feet may only need 2,000 square feet. People aren't getting their private offices anymore. They're actually sharing with other people, and they're having people come in and disinfect. But the idea is simply this. People like that they don't have to live in the city. People like that they can work from home 2 to 3 days out of the week. So the people who I think are the real losers are actually not the big time investors in residential properties or big multifamilies. They're the ones who are holding the commercial paper. They're the ones who own the commercial properties, primarily not retail, but the businesses in town, the commercial properties that you see on Market Street, on JFK, on Arch. I think they're the real losers because, again, due to COVID-19, that's changed everything. So the question is, how do we help those individuals? How do we create more demand for the space, the vacant space that the commercial realtors are going to be trying to sell to people? And I think the only way it can be done, the only way we can even try to get close to filling those spaces is by creating a business-friendly, pro-growth environment, primarily through a very favorable tax situation. But again, you've got to address crime because people will not come to Philadelphia. They will not take jobs. They will not want to work here if they feel that it's not safe for them to park their car, to walk out to public transportation, particularly in the winter when it starts to get dark at 4:30. So I think that the next leader of Philadelphia has to be a little bit of Ed Rendell too. It's got to be someone not only who is pro-growth, but it's got to be someone who is really a cheerleader 24/7. And so far in the race, at least on the Democratic side, I haven't seen that person emerge yet.
Yeah, that's interesting. You said the commercial space. I've thought that too. I mean, as a lender, I think about that, and I'm like, what is the answer to this? And you're right. Maybe crime rate, going down would help that, but it doesn't. That doesn't solve that problem. I don't know what you're going to have to repurpose commercial space in such a way that it's going to change the face of it. I remember when COVID was happening and I drove by, in the middle of it, and I was driving by like a local mall and it was just completely, empty in the middle of for like a week or whatever. And I'm like, this place is, what are they going to do with this? I was like, these retail stores are already on their way out. Like, they're not even surviving to begin with. Or are you going to turn these into like mega mini cities where people live in them? Like, are these just going to become like, what are you going to do with this space? I don't know what the answer is to the commercial space. And you're right. If I was holding, a big piece of commercial space in downtown Philadelphia, I'd be shaking in my boots because I don't know the answer.
Well, I can tell you one of the answers right now. It's unlikely that it will happen, but there should probably be a significant cutback on U&O tax. And, any of the people who are tenants, either there should be a moratorium, which of course the city won't go for because they're going to grab your money any opportunity they get. But the idea is that the commercial industry needs to fight back. In this city, in my opinion, they have never made themselves a political force. I think that they need to learn from the Black Lives Matter group. The Black Lives Matter group, whether you agree with them or not, you have to really admire how effective they were. They shut things down. They blocked traffic. They had people screaming on the streets. The problem is, our business community doesn't do that. Our business community likes to keep their hands clean. We're not going to win if we do that. We could easily get the mayor and get city council to be fair to us if all of a sudden we said, you know what, we're going on strike. We're not going to submit the UNO tax. We're not going to submit transfer taxes from settlements. We're going to pay it. It's all going to be in escrow, but we're not going to let you touch it. And I think that's how Black Lives Matter was very effective. Because when you have one or two people complaining, you're not going to achieve anything. But when you have an entire community that strategically plans how they are going to shut down the city, then it's very effective. We have not had a real business leader in this city. The Chamber of Commerce, in my opinion, is great. It's intellectual. It's helping people that have their businesses, but they're not politically charged. We need someone to emerge who will be politically charged and say the following: what's good for business is good for the city residents. When we hire more people, when we are able to do things that the city is controlling, that's when we can put many of these 500,000 people that live at the poverty level or below, 1/3 of all Philadelphians, we can put them to work. And I mean, one person on the Democratic side who really has practiced what he preaches is Jeff Brown. Now, this is not an endorsement of Jeff Brown. I'm actually a David O supporter. But I will tell you that with Jeff Brown hires Black and brown people that have come out of jail, that live in the neighborhoods of his ShopRite stores, and he puts them to work. That is an example of someone who understands urban politics. That's an example of someone who understands what we need to do to cut down on crime, to give people real jobs, sustainable jobs, and to make a real difference in Philadelphia. And that's why I am excited that there are over 10 announced Democratic candidates at this point, many of whom have some great ideas, because now is the time to have a real debate. And, you know, it can't exist unless those Democrats talk about business. Certainly Alan Dom will, probably Rebecca Reinhart will, but I've gone to Helen Gim's website, and I think that she really is the front runner. I have yet to see her talk about anything that's pro-business. She talks about the worker, which is great. You know, you got to have a worker in a business, but you can be the number one city for workers' rights, and if you don't have any businesses, they're not going to have a job, and it's going to make no difference. So I think part of the solution to addressing crime is not only letting the police do their job, not defunding them, but in fact giving them more funds, but we have to have a solution that revolves around the economy and businesses. And we have to embrace business. And we have to tell people, we want you to come here. We have to have a proactive environment where we're going all around the country, even the world, and saying, come to Philly. And what better opportunity, I mean, when we have sports teams that are winning, the Phillies, the Eagles, I won't mention the other two right now, but certainly when we have that kind of spirit, that helps to get you people here. When we're going to have the World Cup in 2026 in the United States, that's going to help too. But the idea is simply this, that you can't turn around an economy without embracing entrepreneurs from little to large, from your mom and pop to Comcast. If we continue to be anti-business, there is no way this city will turn around and crime will just be more and more rampant.
Yeah, I would agree that I don't think though here, unfortunately, I don't think we're at the pain threshold. I think every situation like this requires a pain threshold. I think it's at the recognition threshold where you're going, hey guys, we better turn something around. But unfortunately, with human nature, it's going to have to get screaming and yelling before that happens. So I would like to think that, hey, somebody's going to turn this around and can head this off the way you're talking. But the reality is I think it's going to get worse before it gets better, and it's going to get worse. And then you will, out of consciousness, have that person emerge. You will have the stronger business leader emerge out of just that diamond being compressed from all that coal is just going to, push somebody to the front surface, and then it's going to swing the other way. Now you could have, only you could look at like the big national scale of like, the whole like Trump era where you had just an extremism of one side, and then you had the Biden situation, which is the extreme of the other side. So how much that pendulum will swing in the Philadelphia market specifically, I don't know. I'm a fan of some of the stuff you're saying for sure. One thing that always concerns me is how far does that get pushed into government intervention with people, right? So I just saw I think they just announced like a curfew in Philadelphia. And I get the concept. I understand what that is. I get it. But to me, that also, we just had a huge infringement of our rights over the past 2 or 3 years that really has, anybody should be upset and alarmed with it. So when you introduce something like that to me anymore, it doesn't go, oh yeah, it's keeping me safe. That goes, no, you're stepping too far into this again. Like you're getting too far. So my question is, if you start going crazy about, the funding the police and so forth, how far does that level get pushed? And then do you need somebody to come on the other side and push that back? I don't know. I don't know the answer to any of that, to be honest. I don't think anybody really does.
Well, let me just say this. I wouldn't get too worried about the civil liberties issue on the curfew, because we've had curfews before and they're not enforced. And in fact, under this curfew, people are not going to be arrested. The kids are going to be taken in a car and driven home. So it sounds to me more like, a nice Uber service. I don't think anyone's, for the most part, I don't think we're going to see a loss of civil liberties, because I don't think it's going to be enforced. We have plenty of laws on the books. They're simply not enforced. I think what will make a real difference right away is if you have somebody with a mindset who says, like Eric Adams from New York City, he said, we're not going to tolerate you driving these ATVs in town, going through red lights, terrorizing people. So what he actually did, and you can go to YouTube and you can put in Eric Adams and ATVs and bulldozer, he had an event where he had a flag and he waved the flag, and then they bulldozed all of these ATVs. That sends a message. He's a guy who's a former cop, who's mayor of New York, and I think it's important that you send a message. We don't have that kind of leader right now. We need a leader. We don't even have a manager. There's no question that Jim Kenney has been the most faceless administrative mayor during our lifetime. So I think that a lot of it will be a function of who our next mayor is and the message that they're going to send. If they send a message that you should come to Philadelphia and Philadelphia is safe and they show the reasons why, then I think we'll be fine. But I am absolutely not worried about loss of civil liberties in Philadelphia. I'm worried about loss of life. And that's the primary reason, again, according to today's Philadelphia Inquirer's lead-in article, why many developers, why many builders simply don't want to come to Philadelphia, because their fear is they're going to build and people are going to say, I don't feel safe living in here. I want to live somewhere else. And the worst thing is, if you have new construction or you have a rehab project, you're heavily in debt, you have it leveraged, and you don't have people to occupy it. And that's a serious problem. So I think that the number one issue we've got to do is we have to address crime. And that may mean that some civil libertarians will come out and say, no, you can't do this. And certainly we shouldn't be to the extreme. But again, I wouldn't worry about curfew, because I see no evidence that we're going to be able to enforce that law.
I think it's more of like a maybe before, pre-COVID, I would never have cared about a curfew. I'm like, I don't care, curfew. But I think the whole mask situation made everybody look up and go, whoa, wait a minute. So anytime I think it's going to be very sensitive. I think people are going to be very sensitive to tell me to do this. I'm not, no. Why are you telling me to do that? Because, you got muzzled for 2 years. It was a crazy scenario.
Muzzled, let me say this too.
Yeah.
Regardless of where you stand on the issue of masks, we were not, when I grew up in the 70s and 80s, we were not a selfish society. We cared about other people. My wife, for example, is from Japan. And we were in a public place one time, and this was well before COVID.
Before you keep going, I'm a big fan of the Japanese culture with the way it supports its citizens. Yeah, big fan.
Well, she was wearing a mask. And this was probably, I don't know, maybe 2014, 2015. When we go to Tokyo, if someone's sick, they have a cold, they wear a mask. So she was wearing a mask, and a security guard asked her to take it off. Now, she was not wearing the mask to protect herself. She was wearing the mask because she was very conscious of other people. And again, this is not talking about COVID, but this is just talking about kind of society. You know, when you talk about, for example, the fringes, in my opinion, are when people say, you know what, I can do whatever I want, you can't stop me. I don't think there should be laws saying you got to wear a mask. But what does concern me, and I think this is part of the problem with the ATVs in Philadelphia, it's part of the problem with the crime. There is little regard for human life. There is little regard for other people. Everything is that radio station. What's in it for me? You know, we've heard that joke before, but that's what it's turned into. If you want to have a city that is a better city, you got to start doing for other people too. And again, I'm not talking specifically about COVID, although I'm not ruling it out. What I am saying is simply this. There was a time, and you probably remember this time too, that if there was a car accident, you would get out and you would try to help someone. Also, up until about 2 or 3 years ago, if someone was about to hit my car and they didn't know it, they were backing up into my car, I would honk the horn. If somebody didn't have their lights on, I would put my high beams on and let them know that their lights were off, and I waved to them. I and many people are not doing these things now because we're afraid of getting attacked, maybe even getting shot. People have very short tempers. And so I think we need to kind of evaluate as a country who we are and whether we're going to have any kind of decency and respect for other people. I understand, hey, my life, don't tread on me. I'm a libertarian myself, so I get that. But my feeling is that, you know, my freedom ends at the point at which I infringe upon your freedom. And so I think that we have to be better. And I think the only way we're going to do that, that's going to take a generation. It's going to take a generation of education in schools. It's going to take parents. You know, I just don't understand why people have kids if they're not going to take the time and teach them about helping other people. We've kind of lost that. And I think that if we can work on that again, and you know, I'm not preaching any kind of faith-based approach to this, although I'm not ruling it out. All that I'm saying is, you and I both know we can't do the things we did a couple years ago to try to be nice to other drivers, to be nice to other pedestrians, because it could be interpreted the wrong way and we could end up being a victim of violence. And that's the problem.
Yeah, I try to look at like the byproduct of the individual not taking responsibility for their own actions, and that happens to then be crime and issues like that. But I think ultimately, like there is no government that's going to come in and save people, whether you're going to fund the police or whether you're going to do it through osmosis. Either or doesn't work. It only works if the people work, right? So I'm a firm believer in what you're saying, that like it starts with the individual first. And then from there, you can build the government and you can have the things around it. But if the people are going to be ruthless and lawless, the government will come in, but it's just going to cause more. It's going to be tougher. It's going to be harder. It's going to cause more issues. So I don't have an answer other than people need to take responsibility for themselves, and you need to go backwards and be the one who, you know, flashes the high beams or helps somebody in a car accident. Like those basic ideas, even though they sound like, oh, that sounds, you know, no, that because that's how you conduct yourself on a daily basis, and then that spreads.
The problem is people are afraid to do that right now. Many people.
And that fear, the fear, that's the problem. Like fear is a terrible thing. So it's like you have to force yourself to break out of that, right? You have to.
But if you break out of that, you may be a victim of violence. It's a pretty good chance.
For me, if it was me personally, you know, I have a limit where I would help somebody in need if I was the bystander that was injured or even killed. In most situations, I would do that. I do things very frequently that help others at my own risk, and you know, I'm okay, but that's everybody's own limit. But my thought process behind that is, if I keep going the other way of fear and I keep letting the fear run me, it's not going to get better.
Right. I can't disagree with you, but again, I think you're an exceptional person, and you're not really representing the general public. The general public.
I'm not exceptional. I'm not exceptional.
You are
I don't
exceptional. But I want to change course a little bit because,
Sure,
English is hard money bankers.
Yeah.
I kind of want to talk about, the city of Philadelphia and what the current political climate means for hard money lenders. And I'm going to give you a couple examples.
Sure.
The diversionary program for evictions was supposed to expire this month. City Council just extended it another 2 years. Now, if landlords don't have the ability to evict when they have right cause and they have to go through additional hoops, that's not going to give investors confidence that they're going to be able to do business in Philadelphia. When Kendra Brooks, the Workers' Family Party candidate and council member on City Council, is able to put through last December a law called the Renters Access Act, where it's now illegal to reject an applicant solely because of a low credit score. She's hurting people who are lenders who need to have confidence that the system works and that if someone along the path does something wrong, that laws will matter. If someone doesn't pay bills, that they can be evicted. If someone is a threat, that they can be evicted. When we have a city council that is now saying, no, we're not going to let you just evict. We want to try to prevent evictions. We want to try to work things out. That is just another expensive cost in the process that may make no difference, but that delays things, and it can certainly hurt the landlord from being able to re-rent a place and get paid. And so I think that if you're a hard money lender in this environment, you really have to pay very careful attention to not only
very
the
aware
candidate, but also the city council candidates. I think, if you are supporting some of the progressive candidates, you are going to bite yourself in the tuchus.
Yeah, I'm very aware of the it is a valid concern. It is, because when I underwrite a project and somebody goes, hey, there's a tenant in that needs to be evicted, instead of me going, okay, no problem, the process is set. Normally it's 60 days you're out, whatever it was before.
90
days you're out, from bell to bell. You're going, this could be 6 months, 9 months. My note's 1 year long.
Or never.
Is there
the city is a stickler. The city has so many new rules. They have a book. I want to mention this book. It's free. Landlords have to give it out. You can Google it by putting in Philadelphia, and it's called Partners in Good Housing. And it was just updated last month. So I just want to spell out very quickly the things you have to do, for example, to be a residential landlord. You have to have a tax ID number. You have to have a commercial activity license. You have to pay $56 per unit annually as a rental license. If it was built before March of 1978, you have to do a lead paint exam. You have to have a bed bug plan in place. And if you've had bed bugs, you have to show proof of the bed bug remediation. You have to have what's called a certificate of rental suitability, that you are attesting that all the fire safety works. Now, if you don't have all of these items, like 100%, a judge can and will turn around and say, I'm not letting you collect any of the back rent, nor will I let you collect any future rent until you have all these items satisfactorily done. And it's a long list. It's a list that, in my opinion, is very unfair for a host of reasons. The biggest reason of which is that when you go to Eclipse, which is a city's government website to get all the work done, Eclipse is often down. Eclipse is often not functioning properly. It doesn't always process your payments. And so if the city is asking us to do some pretty unreasonable things, and they can't even make it possible for us to get all of those done, then it puts investors in a really bad position. And many of them are simply saying, you know what? It's a pain in the ass. I'm going to sell my properties, and maybe I'll buy along a train station in Bryn Mawr, Doylestown, Bala-Cynwyd, but I'm staying out of Philly because Philly is just getting impossible to deal with. And you can have a master's degree or a PhD, but if you've ever been on Eclipse, you know exactly what I'm talking about in terms
Yeah,
of
there's
the
no
possibility
question.
of getting anything done.
Before Hart Money Bankers, I had built a property management company. We had several thousand units in the city of Philadelphia, so I'm super familiar with what
Right,
you're talking about.
right.
And as it was like a 10-year stretch that I was dealing with this. Well, all those things you just talked to were coming in one by one as I was doing this, right? So first it was like, oh my gosh, what's this new lead paint thing? And then it was, oh my gosh, what's this and this and this? And before you knew it, by the end, I was thinking in my head, I was like, how is the average person going to deal with this? Because by the time it was like just a bucket of items that you're like, we had to have literally staff dedicated just to handling that. And so I'm thinking that's insane. Like, how is one person going to come in and do that?
By the way, that's a great business also to start. If you
Oh
want
gosh,
to do, if you will,
not a business I would do again. It's tough.
Right. I'm not encouraging you to do it, but
yeah.
If you wanted to be an online expediter, you could do it for other people.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, there you go.
But the question is, why should we even have to do it? It should be easy as 1, 2, 3. I mean, if we can go on Amazon and we can click one button to get something done, why doesn't the city of Philadelphia make it easier?
There shouldn't be a need for that job.
I'll pay my taxes. I'll pay the fees, but make it easy for the average person. Maybe someone who didn't even graduate from high school. Make it easy for that particular landlord to register their property. Don't make it impossible so that when they're trying to evict, the person gets to live there free because they didn't dot the I or cross the T. That's the issue.
I think it's the simple basic concept on the internet of the click-through rate, right? Your click-through rate is every time, there's an actual percentage, every time I have to click again, you're losing a sale. So it's the same thing as like a landlord. Well, every time that I don't dot the T, don't cross the I, don't get the piece of paper, you go, I don't even want to be here anymore. You lose your sale in the city. You lose your investor. It's the same basic human concept of like you just said about Amazon. You make it one click and easy. If it's easy, we do it. If it's not easy, I'll go somewhere else and do it.
Right. Now, I want to talk about one or two other issues also that will interest your viewers. One is I want to talk about how the normal 10-year tax abatement is going away. The normal 10-year tax abatement was, you didn't pay on the improved area for 10 years. Now what it's going to turn into is the first year, you don't pay on the improved area. Second year, 90%, you get 90% off. Third year, 80% off. So it's declining now. So that's the first thing I want to tell people about. Also, the kind of temporary good news, and this was, believe it or not, because of labor, which ordinarily I'm not on their side, but I was in this case. There was a push by the mayor and city council to charge builders, and I guess the owners are going to be the ones who have to pay it, charge builders a 1% tax on the cost of building that they would have had to pay up front. Now, luckily, that's off the shelf right now, but it seems like city council just wants to try to grab money any way it can. It did with the water runoff tax. I mean, there's so many new taxes that have been created that really discourage people from coming into Philly. So we need to make the process easier, but we also need to make it fair. If you can do business in Bensalem or Chester, which are on both sides of Philly, and they've made it easier and they welcome people, why should we lose people? That's what happened with the soda tax. The soda tax really didn't stop people from drinking soda. It made them buy it in Bensalem. It made them buy it in Chester, made them buy it in Delaware, and we lost a lot of jobs. And most of the money wasn't even used for universal pre-K. So it was kind of a bait and switch. So when these new kinds of Uber taxes come about, it hurts investors. And when you hurt investors, you hurt the people who they fund, who are the local builders, the local mom and pop outfits. So I think that the message from today's show is that I want everyone who's listening, who's a hard money lender or who's an investor, to pay careful attention to next year's municipal elections in Philadelphia. 17 city council seats up for grabs. 1 mayor's seat. We need balance. We need a centrist, but we need someone who is going to be pro-business, because unless we can improve on that engine, our city's not going to emerge from being crime-ridden and being unsuccessful. We need a cheerleader. We need a new Ed Rendell.
On that note, I think that's a perfect way to everybody can leave and see John's passion for the city. And John, if people wanted to contact you, do you have contact
Yes,
information?
they can reach me at JohnJOHN at featherman.com. FEATHERMAN.com. I am not John Featherman, although we know each other and we often get confused with each other. So John at featherman.com. That's the best way to reach me. It's been a real pleasure to be here, and thank you for all the great informative shows you put together with our city leaders.
Thanks, John. You take care.
You too.